Indeed.
Indy.
Indy. We named the dog Indy. And there were 2 more films after this. Can you believe that? Everything is terrible. Okay. Yeah, baby. Okay. Hold on a second. Man, now you know my oath. Anyways. Sorry. I'm giddy.
You are, and it's beautiful.
How do I edit this so it's private?
I have no
Or do we
idea.
just want to leave it like live and whoever can watch it can watch it?
Well, how are we so this will record on Riverside.
Yes, it's recording on Riverside and it's broadcasting live onto YouTube right now.
Cool.
What
Is
I
this all
don't
through Riverside?
Yes.
Nice.
What I don't know is how we can share it. Customization, live chat, subscribers, anyone.
Please, dear God. Someone.
Okay. So this is what I'm going to do. It's live, so I'm going to go to the Patreon really quick.
Okay.
We're going to use YouTube Live. I meet all the requirements. How do I... Okay, now I need to find the YouTube live stream.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Is it not just the URL, or is it something different than the URL?
I don't know. Because I'm in like this... I'm in... Okay. Gomer, like, I imagine this is what it's like to be my lover, so...
Won't you be my lover?
Okay. Today's a... No, I don't want to schedule this post. Sorry, Gomer, I'm so sorry.
Hey, I'm here.
Why
for
isn't
you.
doing this now? Like, all right, give me just a second if you don't mind, please. No, I don't want to schedule this post. I want to publish now. Okay. Okay, so I think we're streaming live on YouTube. And that was
Heyo.
deceptively easy. I can't wait to see what the YouTube comments are like, so I'm not going to read them. Why? Because I am insecure.
Oh, and you know what's really great, Luke? Oh my gosh, what just happened? Okay,
What?
who cares? Okay. I was like, all of a sudden, all these windows went away, and I was like, did I just close down Luke? No. As soon as we hit record, my tree guy just showed up to assess the tree damage in our backyard from the world's most insane storm that came on Wednesday. So we finally, 1 week later, we finally have people looking at our trees. So our insurance adjuster is coming out tomorrow. It's insane.
That sounds exhausting.
My life is absolutely insane.
I know. We've barely spoken for like the last 3 weeks.
I know. It's been weird.
It's been weird. I agree. I've been meaning to call you, but it's been so busy.
Yeah.
I had family in town. You had life. I tried to get away. Tell you what, you want to get your place very clean and not have to do anything? Have your mom stay with you for a week. Patty, wow. Wow.
Cleanest it's ever been.
Oh my gosh. 9 day. At one point in time, she goes, so I put a laundry basket with Everly's stuff in the corner, and I just thought, you're not going to mind that it's there because no one's really ever over here. And I was like, oh, Mom, you cut deep.
People think I'm cool. People think I'm cool.
I may have moved from a C-list Catholic celebrity to a D-list Catholic celebrity, but it's better than not being a Catholic celebrity.
Oh, man.
What are you looking at right now?
So I have an idea, but I don't know if I want to keep it for today's show.
I have an
also
idea.
have ideas.
I have ideas.
Yeah.
So our boy was just on the Matt Fradd show. How exciting was that?
Oh,
5
dude.
hours.
4 hours and 37 minutes with one pee break during probably an ad for Hallow.
Dude, it was great. It was great. I was so proud of you.
Show.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I was only three and a half hours away, but still, like, that was really cool. I'm glad you were able to do that. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Luke, he reached out to me and he was like, listen, Gauma, I don't want Luke on.
I
said,
hate
really?
him.
Because I have the distinct impression we're going to spend the first 45 minutes talking about Luke. And that's indeed what we did.
He said he doesn't want me on?
No, he did not say that.
Oh, insecurities.
Actually, when we were like getting set up and we were just talking about stuff, he goes, how's Luke? And I go, can we just be honest? Luke's your favorite. And he's like, I didn't know. No.
And he was like, who told you?
Yeah. Man, so my life is absolute chaos right now.
Yeah.
It is absolute chaos. And let me just say, I thank God I work for Paradisius Day right now because I'm living the remote dream. I'm learning a whole bunch of crap about what it means to be a man. Meanwhile, my wife is dealing with all the contractors to fix our house. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Shandy's able to talk shop with them and hang out, and they're like, I'm learning stuff from her about how to be more like efficient and stuff and what's really going on.
She's like, and this is how you make lists. Oh, see.
Oh,
see.
oh wow, that's racist.
Yeah, well, he is Hispanic. His name is Caesar, and he is amazing.
Nice. Maybe I'm the terrible one. So I have a cold in June. Do I sound sick?
You do sound a little sick.
Yeah, your boy, like, I don't know if it's sinuses. I'm feeling it in my nose, in my throat. Man, if I have allergies or sinuses, like, what the heck?
No, thank you.
Boo earns. So, so that's been terrible. So since you're coming off the Matt Fradd show, there's some stuff I was going to go into, but I'm like, you know what? We may have some new people who heard you from that show. Let's save the crap show that is our lives until next week.
Okay, fair enough.
So, I mean, we just go into it.
So you
now.
don't want me to talk about my standing desk and my walking under desk treadmill?
No, you'll find a way to bring it in regardless.
I will.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
I'm just kidding. I'm not on it right now. I'm next.
Have you ever seen Big Fish?
No, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Big Fish is a wonderful film that I actually really encourage everyone to go watch. That you're not going to like it first, but then the more you think about it over the years, the more you're going to appreciate what it's doing and what it is trying to, I was to say, while also being a little bit frustrated by just the overall execution. But basically, in Big Fish, this guy just is telling his wife his dad is dying, and he goes home, and he has a hostile relationship to his dad because he feels like he doesn't really know his dad. All he knows of his dad are the stories his dad has told him, and he's like, these stories are all fake.
Yeah.
But then the bulk of the film goes through those stories as if they were real, kind of like it's like telling you the story.
That's right.
And you know it's like not real, but it's like it like has a fantasy element to it. But he's like, I want to know the real you, not this stuff.
Yeah.
And in the end, so spoiler alert, his dad dies, like you would expect. And
oh no,
he's talking to the guy, like I think it's like the town doctor, and he's able to like reconcile to his dad to like a certain extent, but he's still not able to quite get over like I didn't know the real him, like and his dad's the guy who like tells these big stories and blah blah blah, and so
spins a good yarn.
Yeah, and he's talking with the doctor, and he goes, and then the doctor goes, when you were born, your dad was on like a sales call in Podunk, New Jersey. I think that story's a bit more interesting. and it's like, and what he's trying to say is like the stories your dad told, it contain real life truths to it, but they're like, it just makes the boring a bit more exciting. And there's this thing to it when something is a mystery, it's a bit more fun until you find out. It's like, oh, so it's just that, huh?
It's just live.
And like it reminds me a little bit of like when you said this is a lot of exposition for just a comment on your stand-up desk thing. Is that like when you learn like in Matt Fradd's thing, you talk about how like obsessed you get into stuff, which I'm not sure if you're aware is a classic ADHD trait, which is why the like two of us go about doing that.
Yeah.
And it's like that takes the fun out of it. You know, like I'd rather just make fun of you for it. I would rather be, wow, Luke. So what are you into this decade? Last decade, it was like soccer. What are you going to make your entire personality about now? Cities with no cars. That's the answer. However,
have you discovered the YouTube channel? Not just bikes.
I almost became a supporter for like a once a month for this thing about sustainable cities. And I was like, Luke, you're in no position to do that right now. I was like, what about $5 a month? What about $5 a month? And I was like, no, the rule was not a thing. No new things and not anything, whatever. So, so you know what? I say, screw reality. Let's embrace the mystery.
Okay.
So, see everyone. Oh, okay. Anyways, do you want me to tell you what I think the topic should be today?
Yeah.
All right. So the other day being, let's say 3 weeks ago, I sent you a tweet that says, I was on a walk and I had some thoughts about Bullet to Binary Part 2 by the band Me Without You.
You sent me a tweet.
I said tweet. By tweet, I meant text.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
This is Luke not feeling his best, so prepare for a lot of things that aren't going to make sense.
Hey, but since we haven't talked basically at all in 3 weeks, I could probably find it pretty quickly.
Actually, if you could pull it up, that'd be great.
That'd be great. So this is, June 8th. No, that's when you sent me the thing that we read in the last podcast. Oh, here it is.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
This is from June 9th. Thinking about our conversation about a sacrifice being at the heart of Western civilization, Me Without You's Bullet to Binary Part 2, and the end of Harry Potter. Okay. Woo.
I thought there was one more. Was there not one more thing?
The next text said, can you record an ad sometime today before 1 Central Time?
Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you. I'm doing a sprint for work and shouldn't be doing this right now.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was okay. I think there was probably in the context of some quote, probably like you have to die a hero before every man dies a hero, or he lives long enough to become the villain.
Okay.
I was thinking about that with regards to like we had a conversation maybe 2 weeks ago about Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, who's just a monster, and a lot of other things about masculinity and developing healthy views of that stuff, and the tension that can exist by following someone like Jordan Peterson, and certainly the evil that someone like Andrew Tate proposes. And I was thinking about like when you and Matt had a conversation that I was like, oh, this is the one I wish. I've only seen about an hour of it, but I was like, this is the thing that I want to like. I wish I could be there for this. Everything else I don't really care about.
This is Luke pissing on things that I love.
That's not true. No. Really, I wouldn't be able to add anything. I agree with like what you said.
See, is it
That's
funny?
what I mean.
That's the difference. So you could have said, well, I couldn't really contribute, but instead it was like, and I don't really care about the rest of that crap.
But it's more funny the other way. It's more. I'm sorry. Do you want the mystery, or do you want boring unreality? Do you want big fish, or do you want I don't know, like you went into a lot of plays. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, sacrifice.
Like, yeah. So and you guys were going into okay. Well, let me start with a Bullet to Binary part 2. Do you remember how that song starts?
Let us die, in dying we reply.
It sure does. Yeah, and then in the end, it does the thing where it's like everyone, everywhere. It's all about forgiveness.
Yeah,
and,
all the time, everyone, everywhere, everything.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of Harry Potter, like he dies. I think Harry Potter is actually more about like an initiation into manhood.
Cool.
Having to learn to bring about stuff is ultimately only through death that you can overcome those things, and how like that's the heart of the West. Is it's like. Yeah. It is, but then in the Me Without You song, there's a really, really interesting thing where it's like the end they go into about forgiveness. So it starts with death and it ends with forgiveness, which I think is fascinating. And when I think about like what you and Matt talked about how like Catholic content has gotten extremely volatile since around 2016.
Yeah.
Somewhere around then, things started to change. I don't know if I think it's not the election person. I actually think this and the election are like, probably more on the symptoms of like a greater thing. And I remember Catholic stuff, maybe like 3-4 years ago, I had a podcast where they were just like, when did we become the villains?
Yeah.
Like, when did we become the liberals? And they were like kind of calling out Taylor Marshall and Father James Martin and there's been this definite like, shift and this definite hostility. And it's really like, has made me think that like when there is a lack of leadership by the people who are supposed to be leading you, it's filled with demigods, things that you like cling to hold on for like for some type of safety. And I'm like, oh wow, like so is this like why we're kind of in this like why everyone's so like angry? It's like we don't our like and here's like the real point here. We don't have a lot of as certainly as American Catholics, we could use with better leadership. I think we both would agree with that. The problem is when we turn to like these demigods, we do so under an American lens, or the like lens of the West, which is ultimately like I'm the one who determines like reality. So unless this makes sense to me, then it only is right if it makes sense. And if I don't I think there's a lot of, this is one reason why I think everyone's gotten so hostile towards each other. There's a lot of, this makes sense to me, this other part does not, therefore this has to be right.
Okay. Yeah.
As opposed to this attitude of receptivity towards the church or these other. And I'm not saying that like people who are mad, that's what they're doing. But I'm saying this is why I think we have the screaming, because we really have the lack of leadership. So we already have the demigods, and then we're basically saying if this makes sense to me because it's ingrained in our brains that I'm the one who like my truth, my reality is this. If it makes sense to me, then it has to be real. So we don't allow for a lot of mystery. There has to be answers here. There has to be answers. And if there's not, or if I'm uncomfortable with that, or it doesn't make sense, then it can't be right. And then because we don't have this, like, we don't embrace death at all. We cling to these things as having to be right to give us any type of meaning, which is why I think someone like Andrew Tate is able. I saw a tweet saying like high school kids are starting to look up to this dude. And I'm like, what? Like, that is the worst thing. Like that is not, I mean, this guy like may have been engaging in human trafficking. You know, like this is really bad. This is really bad that we think that like this is okay. I'm like, why are we doing this? And I started to, I'm thinking about that while you guys talked. I'm like, I wonder if there's just a lot of like, we're so angry and we're so willing to cling to stuff that if it makes sense, we'll say, well, then yes, then this has got to be true, because ultimately we still can't let go because it's ingrained in our brains. Like you honestly, like you have to like, there's a profound change that like probably is a lifelong thing to get to a point where like I'm not the one who's actually determining what is real or what's not. That is a lot. And I'm still trying to unpack a lot of that. So tell me what you think.
Well, I would say it sounds a lot like what I was reading in, I might have it here, The Friendship of Christ from Robert Hugh Benson, which is a book that is so fascinating. I think it's the antidote to the, what do you call it, the deconstructing discipleship stuff. I really do. If people could understand it before they deconstruct. That said, he talks a lot about the soul as it's going through the purgative and illuminative stage. And hang on just a second. I don't think I need a lot of explanation, actually. But he talks about, like, within yourself, you can have these great and profound spiritual maturity. But he said that Christ doesn't stop there. Christ's manifestation, truth, grace, right to someone's heart, the truth of the gospel, is only part of how Christ reveals himself to humanity, right? So the incarnation, the historic reality, the Paschal mystery. That's one. 2 is Scripture. 3, sacraments, right? And then our relationship with Christ, as I understand him. And then he has this great line where he says, and then the church. And that's the one that we don't really want to submit to, especially when we have an advancement in our spiritual life. So he was basically saying the greatest heretics in the history of the church are those who are almost at the very end of the illuminative stage, which is like super advanced, right? I'm not there, right? So I'm not a great heretic. Super advanced. He said, otherwise, how could, of course they have to be this far advanced. How could they deceive so many of God's children, right? And he said, the one thing they are more sure of is that they are right and the church is wrong, right? And he said, that's where Christ becomes manifest in, like, this is how he safeguards the church, by giving us the church, so that you and I, even the and this is a thing I see in the lives of the saints, even the horrible hierarchs, right? The horrible ones, the ones who are doing all sorts of stuff, and they squash the saints because they are jealous of their, people flocking to them or whatever. God uses the horrible ones, the horrible bishops, the horrible dicastery members who are getting in the way of what God, whatever. But it's still God working because he's making that saint better, right? So the priest who is stripped of his ability to celebrate Mass, like Padre Pio, publicly, and even though that's all he ever wanted to do, that made Padre Pio holier, right? So even the horrible ones. So he goes through and he talks about the external voice of Christ in the church, right? We call him the body of Christ, the bride of Christ. He says, but the church is Christ. It's his body made manifest on the earth, right? Like it's still Christ. And so this is the difficult thing is like, and this is why, honestly, this is why I'm Catholic. I don't know if you remember several years ago, it might have been the USCCB Office of Young Adult Ministry, but it's like, why are you still Catholic? Tweet it out. And people were tweeting all these like folksy things, and you were like, because it's the bride of Christ, you son of a, or you remember that? Like you said something funny and characteristically, awesomely, Luke.
Yeah. And everyone quietly was like, thank you.
He said what we were thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's that notion that like if what the Bible says about the church is true, then I need to check my truth and my rage against that. Now, I think the level of complication comes in where you have faithful theologians and faithful bishops and faithful priests and faithful saints who seem to now be contradicting one another. Or what was old is now viewed as bad, or what is new is now viewed as bad. And you have this descent into camps, because for every one Pope Francis quote, I can give you one JP2 quote. Forever, and the tit for tat that I don't like. Obviously, the Holy Spirit guarantees the infallibility of the church. That doesn't mean Vatican II was perfectly inspired like Holy Writ, like sacred scripture. And so that's where I think a lot of this confusion comes in. And I think you're right around that date of 2016, because I bet you could probably back it up. It's just like that notion of momentum. There's probably a lot of stuff going, but like that flywheel is just starting to spin. And I think the reason is because audio podcasts, and then probably in the 20 teens, video podcasts, namely YouTube, became accessible to the masses. And Catholics were like, oh, hey, technology, it's not just for porn, right? And that's where I think you have, right? I mean, it is
so funny. That was so funny.
right. Well, you know what I mean?
Slow,
like,
I don't feel good.
There's a fear of like, live streaming services. Look, women with thong butts everywhere.
Well, and
then everyone gets their own show, right? And you can.
Yeah.
Like, I can turn this camera on, and for people who are less intelligent than me, I can win them over to my cause, which no one should ever do. Right.
Well, and there's a couple things. I think you're right about like the internet, like because that's what you basically said on Matt's show, and I agree with that. I do think there's an element of what I think it's Allison McIntyre talks about how people are just going to be screaming over each other because their first premise is off. This is what it leads to. I think there's an element of that going on with all this as well.
Oh, yeah.
So,
but see, I think, though, so his argument, what Luke's referring to, and After Virtue talks about...
You're so excited about this, aren't you?
Well, I've learned to talk about it briefly in a way that's still engaging. Probably not. But in Chapter 1, he sets up like 3 different arguments, like abortion, capital punishment, or whatever. But when in Chapter 2, he says, now, why do we yell at each other? We yell at each other not because we're being illogical, but because we have different starting points. If our first principles are fundamentally different, then even if our conclusions are similar, they're still fundamentally different. So a Thomist would say that abortion is wrong because it's the unjust killing of an innocent human life. A Kantian might say abortion is wrong because you take that principle of action, apply it universally, and wipe out the whole human race. A utilitarian would say, no, pro-abortion, pro-this, unless there's certain, whatever. So he was trying to show in After Virtue that all these different like moral schemas that we have, frameworks of viewing morality as such and life as such, they're so different, even though we use the same language, like good and evil, rights and wrongs and all that stuff. Even though we use that language, we're talking past each other using the same language. And he said, so that's why, and this is one of the great, I'm going to paraphrase it, but great lines from the book is, at the end of the day, politics becomes shrill. We just yell at each other because we don't have the same first principles. So we can't come to conclusions together. So we just yell at each other, and he said, and that is why the lawyers are the clergy for the new millennium, because it used to be the church would resolve these things. And now it can't because we no longer have that as first principle. So now it's like, well, we'll see what the Supreme Court says. And it just kind of gets left out there.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, that's what's one of the things that's so interesting about a lot of this stuff is when you have these gaps, when you have like a lack of leadership, and really I think something like, I don't know if it's really a lack of, I think there is a lack of leadership. I think there are a lot of great bishops now who are trying to do stuff. And I think there are people who are trying to do a lot of good stuff in the past. So I don't even know if that's even the right way to put this, but it's like, is the structure itself the way it exists right now even the best fit? Or have we, you know what I mean? Like, is it better, should we quadruple the amount of the dioceses that we have? Should we change a bit of like how these dioceses are, you know, like it's because we have a democratic, pluralistic society with a lot of competing interests, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
You know, and so, but when there's a gap and people aren't sure, then you get the demigods, and they're the ones who are coming in that you can just immediately cling to. And one of the things that's tough, I think, is you said those kind of like 4 things that people, when it comes to Christ. Can you just go over what those 4 things were again from the Friendship of Christ book?
4 things?
Yeah, you were like you have the sacraments, you have your own. Yeah.
Well, he has actually more than 4. I just listed the 4, but it's like your individual. Number 1, Christ coming in history, right? Mm-hmm. Then Christ coming to you particularly, so your interior life.
Yeah.
But then he goes through and describes the exterior things and the Eucharist, right? The sacraments,
sure,
Scripture, the priest, right?
And then you have the church. Yeah. So then, like, what I'm wondering, what I'm hearing you say all of that is it actually so you said like the church kind of, they're seeming to contradict each other, which I think is like a fair point.
Yeah.
And then I also think there's like stuff that there can be tension. Things can be 2 things at once.
Yeah.
You know, like I was talking about this with a good buddy of mine, trying to understand a bit more about John Paul II's and Benedict's view on labor, and they seem sometimes a little contradictory. But he was saying like, well, they could be, but they also just made. Sorry, they both might be true, and they're able to hold that tension a bit, and that's okay because light. Sorry, it's cold. Great podcasting, and I'm YouTubing, Luke. Like life has gradients, right. And so, if the church is hard to understand, hard to cling to, often seems to be contradicting herself, then I'm relying on the individual and my own experience of my own relationship with Christ, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. But when that is not checked by the church, and you're in a culture where you are raised that you think, therefore you determine your own reality.
Yeah. That
has an impact, even if you reject it.
Yeah.
Because our entire framework of how we understand everything is built through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's where I think some of this disconnect comes in, is because there are these things where I'm like, and okay, I'll just point to my own life. We've argued a lot, and I've worked through very loudly some of the stuff I'm having with like all the liturgies, because I love the old stuff, but then I can't say that that's right, and then that the felt masses of Vatican II are wrong. The felt banner masses of Vatican, because like I have seen those profoundly said, and I have like experienced God, and I have seen God's love, like, and so there's this thing of like, well, it can't be like one's got to be right and one's got to be wrong. I'm like, well, is that actually true? But it's because I think that like I need to understand which one is right, because I am the one who's determines like what is right and what is wrong. Ultimately, is how I've been raised to view. I mean, all of us, through like.
It's so funny you're saying this, because this is like, in a way, you're touching upon the principal critique of the West, and by the West, I don't mean the inheritance of Judeo-Christianity. I mean the Latin version, the Latin side, as opposed to the Greek side of Christianity. The Greek side and all the Eastern provinces and North African, they look at us and they say, quit trying to scrutinize the mystery, right? Mm-hmm. Like because of our inheritance of Roman civil law and the way it got embodied in canon law and then feudalism and British common law, like all of these things in the Middle Ages separated from the Roman Empire in the East. It led to entirely different. I mean, think about this. In the East, you had 4 of the 5 principal sees still being maintained, right? Still being maintained, still existing.
What do you mean by seats for people who don't know
Seats,
what you mean by
seats,
that?
the apostolic seats from the original 12 apostles. You got Alexandria, Egypt. You have Jerusalem.
Alexandretta.
Which Jerusalem, the Muslims kind of took care of that, but there was still somewhat overlap. The Arabs let that happen somewhat, but then you have Antioch and Constantinople, and you have those, and then there's Rome, and Rome is first. Rome has primacy, and then third Rome is, of course, Moscow in Orthodox theology. So you think about this. So you have these 5 sees, these 5 seats of apostolic origin, and then within these kind of seats, the East gets divided at the Adriatic. So Italy has very little to do with Greece, mostly because of the rise of Islam and the collapse of the empire in the western part of Europe. But then think about this. But the one see that remains is the primary see, is the Vatican, is Rome. And so the universal church has only got one guy at the top, whereas in the East they have 4 guys that are near enough the top. So that there's like organic development happens in all different ways, but the head of the whole church is in the West. And so the head of the whole church had a lot more interaction with Western kings and princes and could affect a lot more events. So it's just interesting that in the West you have this strong feudalistic move. You were insulated from Islam from Poland on down because of the presence of the Eastern Empire and Moscow and all that stuff. But in the middle, you have this unique thing that's developing, and especially with St. Thomas Aquinas and the scholastic, with the rise of scholasticism in general, not just Thomas. But you have this desire for Aristotelian precision. But the critique comes in, you can tend to be a rationalist if you let that impulse go way too far. And from the beginning of Thomism, the East has criticized this impulse as like when understanding transubstantiation. I remember when we were at the Greek Orthodox, the Greek Festival in Atlanta, and it was awesome. The guy outside was like, "What?" And he was like, you could tell he was a layman that was super excited. And I've told the story before, but he was like, "What happens when Mass is celebrated and the Eucharist is made? The priest says the prayers of consecration, and then it becomes the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, or it becomes Jesus. Now, is that transubstantiation? No, we can't define it." And it's like,
You got so mad.
right, I did. I got so mad.
I'm like, we're just in line. Let it go.
and I was like, I can't. And I won't.
It was a beautiful church.
And I told the priest, hey, the guy out there is misrepresenting conciliar Christology and the Catholic Church. Anywho, but that notion of transubstantiation.
Hire me. Here's my card.
Yeah, it's like, I got a podcast. Perhaps you've heard of it. We have one Orthodox Patreon supporter, and he loves the hell out of us. But no, constantly, and the best part with the quote unquote uniate churches, the Eastern Catholics who are Eastern churches that are united Rome, is they are bringing huge amounts of this Eastern view into Catholicism. And a lot of the Nouvelle Theology guys, the Vatican II guys,
My boys.
they start like pumping the brakes, and they're like, yeah, there's elements of this that ought to provide a cautionary tale, at least a giant yield sign as we plunge ever forward in our distinctions and all that stuff.
So what does the East tell the West again? I'm still a little bit confused about that.
You're trying to define too much of the mystery.
Do you think that kind of actually in a weird way like ties into what we were saying with Big Fish, where it's like you're trying to understand this to a point where it's just like you're actually missing the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's what that in a lot of ways that's what they talk about, right? Like our obsession over like a legalistic parsing out of mortal sin and venial sin, are legal, like they see it as it all tends towards legalism. And I don't know, you could call it Phariseeism, but or whatever. But because for instance, when the Exodus series, I guess, that Daily Wire is putting on with Jordan Peterson, right? Jordan Peterson did this famous Genesis series, which was incredible, looking at it from a psychological lens, and he's doing it for Exodus. He'd been saying to do it for years, and then he stopped. But then Daily Wire funded it, and he has a bunch of people representing Jews and Christians and non-believers on this panel. And Jonathan Padu, I don't know how you say his name, Jonathan, French guy, he's French-Canadian, but he's Orthodox. And they were talking about whether like is pornography count as adultery? And everyone, the Jews and the Christians are debating back and forth, and Jonathan just goes, this argument is so foreign to me. Like, this is just weird. Like I feel like you're just splitting hairs, but I'm sure he's saying, and that's totally a Western way of thinking. Like, we want to make razor sharp distinctions, and maybe when we stare at God, the mysterium tremendum, the tremendous mystery, we can't always do that. And it's like the relationship with predestination. When does God's sovereignty end and human freedom begin? That line doesn't really exist in a way that's knowable to human persons. Now, that doesn't mean that what we say in our investigations are meaningless, but it does mean that there's always a greater mystery, because we're talking about infinitude. We're talking about God and our little brains. That's all.
Man, that really opens up a lot of stuff, because
Then it makes theology more about prayer and humility, doing theology on your knees, than it does about figuring everything out.
Yeah.
We want to figure.
Well, I go back to my point earlier about, like, when you are raised to think that you define your own reality.
Yeah.
Every story that you read, every movie you watch, every TV show that you pay attention, like, how, of course you're going to cling to that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it makes total sense to me. And if you don't know who to turn to, then you're going to turn to the demigods.
Yeah.
And I'm frustrated, and all this is hard. So, and
rate what you're saying. Okay.
Go ahead.
Matthew Crawford, we talked about it way back in the day in his book, The World Outside Your Head. He has this line where he's talking about everyone wants to be an individual, right? The idea is accept no truth, the Enlightenment principle, accept no truth other than the truths that you yourself can prove. And he said, that's impossible. No human being can live that way. There is so much in our lives, so many truths in our life that we just take for granted. We don't even know that we're accepting some truth or some syllogism or whatever. And he said, so this is what happens, especially politically and morally and religiously, you could say. Most people do not have the mental capacity to scrutinize philosophically or theologically the things that they hold. And he said, so what most individualists do who champion individual freedom of expression and all that stuff, most of the time what we do then is, what do? We default to groupthink. Right, we look for the demigods. We look for the signposts. We look for the people that say, "Yeah, that's the banner I want to wear. I like."
We look for the podcasters. Yeah,
well, as well they should, Luke.
Yeah, please.
Patreon.com/CF.
Yeah. Now more than ever.
No, please, God.
Now more than ever. Really, not kidding. Now more than ever.
Yeah, and let me just tell you, as we were sitting here, my wife texted me. Right, remember the tree guy came?
Yeah.
This is what it says. It's going to be $6,750. I'll show you the trees, he said, are damaged. Then there's one more that he says is dangerous, but maybe can wait. And they need to have it by Friday so they can start cutting them down.
Are you paying for that, or does that come from your insurance, or you're reimbursed?
Well, our insurance company didn't return our phone calls for a solid week, so they're only coming out tomorrow morning. So hopefully they will pay us. And here's a cool thing. A buddy of mine is a roofer, Brian, the Thomas, the peeping Thomas. He also
is?
He's not a roofer. He is a salesman for a roofing company. Is that
new?
A side gig of a side gig of a side gig. And and he said,
"What a man!"
I know. Like shockingly, I know, CrossFit, philosophy.
It's when your main job is like a church liturgist, you're not going to think like roofer sales guy as well.
You know what's funny? At St. Anthony's, there's like 3 dudes like that. It's like, I build custom homes and do music for liturgy. But no, Brian was like, listen, man, I'm going to send my guy, the head roofer guy. He's going to come tomorrow when your insurance adjuster's there, and he's going to be your advocate. And I was like, thank you, Jesus, because this is going to be thousands and all my fences are destroyed. All this is destroyed.
Yeah.
I'm a sad little Gomer. So patreon.com/CF. And I promise you, I do spend every dollar that comes in on my family because they're terrible.
But
that's a it really is a danger. Going back to our thing, like the demigods it's a way of feeling like we're thinking through things, and we all do it. There's not a single human being alive that doesn't do it. That doesn't say, "Oh, I prefer von Balthasar versus de Lubac," and you might have never read de Lubac, right? But people say that, right? Oh, I prefer the Communio school versus.
I mean, do you think that's why people lose their shit over Dare We to Hope, when it's just like, listen, you don't understand it, like, just relax?
Well, I think But okay, so then the other side is
That makes you so uncomfortable, doesn't it?
no. No, not at all, not even remotely. Because Dare We Hope, originally called "Is It Permissible to Hope," is like a fringe part of it's like a side project of it's like roofing.
Yeah.
It's a side project for him to
yeah.
like investigate. And it became like this flashpoint for people like Ralph Martin, who I love Ralph Martin, but I'm like, yeah, no. But the thing is, here's the other thing though. If you have teachers that you trust, number one, you have to realize that your teachers are just as susceptible to the, what do you call them, demigods that we are, that we lay people, but also if you have teachers that you trust and they give you their trusted opinion, I think there's this element where it's like, I can accept it without investigating further. And as long as they give me good reasons. There's a line from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that I was reading.
No, it's good. It's good.
He says, everything
Fucking
we
nerd.
hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not a truth. And I just think like, if you walk through, it's kind of like a universal skepticism tends to cancel itself out. But there is this notion of like, yeah. When I hear someone speak in absolutes, including me, which fan of the show Rebecca called me out on, and I'm thankful that she did. But there's these elements of like we can speak with such certitude about that which we know so little about, and the reason why we speak with certitude is because we know 1%. We think that 1% is 100%, and so everything we hear is an opinion, even if that's not true. Like there are true things that we hear. That attitude will actually pull you away from false idol worship. We don't need no demigods, no demiurge here.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So like what? Okay, so then if I'm like, how can we take this beyond our heads and actually make our lives better with this? Like because I mean, it's okay. Like here's why I asked this, because in addiction recovery, you've got your like on the surface stuff.
Yeah.
So like I'm not going to go down this street. I'm not going to talk with this guy. I'm going to get rid of my dealers. I'm going to get rid of his like number on the phone. I'm going to, you can check my records, all that stuff, and blah blah. And that's all good. That's all very important.
Yeah.
But then there's like the next layer, which is like the emotion. Like perhaps here's the things I'm going to try to do for myself whenever this comes up. But then there is the next layer where it's like here's the healing that I need, and all 3, 4, 5 on the levels need to be working at all times.
Yeah.
And when there's a breakdown in one, it can lead to a breakdown in the other, and it's important to like understand. And I'm not an expert in this by any means necessary, but like that I just think it's a very fascinating concept. So it's like, is this why perhaps just getting off the internet isn't really enough? Because it's not really the internet's fault,
Right.
so like
Right. The internet has an amplifying effect, but it's not the cause of.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, and so like, what do you do? Like, so to me, I think like. What I struggle with a lot is I saw this really great thing on Twitter from this Jesuit. I think he's a brother about to become a priest or something. That sometimes it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and I don't remember his name, so I apologize. But it's this great thing about like, hey, when your bishop, like, because there's this one bishop, I think it's Strickland or whoever, got called out by the Vatican. He was angry about it, and he was like, hey, like going back to your point, like there are saints who were called out, and they're saints, and they followed it. And he's pointing towards this one saint who actually like rebuked his followers who were trying to fight Rome.
Yeah.
And it's like, do we need a little bit more of that then? Do we need to like kind of like, even though Pope Francis is saying stuff where it's like, like, do we need to kind of just be like, well, history judges the popes, Catholics don't. Do
what
where, do we need to work a bit more on our obedience, particularly to our local bishop and then to Rome and to our priest? Do we need to just perhaps open the air a bit with like our friends and our communities about what does obedience actually look like? Because
the conversation online or
plugging,
whether that be like
once a week or as a whole or for a season, all good. You're solving like a symptom. You're just going right instead of going left, and you're going to go home and you're going to get stressed, and you're going to get stressed, and that's going to trigger the addiction. And you're going to so it's like, what do you do to like get to a point where like there's some real inner healing going on, or there's some like actual real hardcore changes as opposed to things that you're avoiding.
Yeah, well, and then you add to this that we also, as lay people, we have a right to voice our concerns to the hierarchy. Right. And see, this is the part, this is what always muddies the water. So let's say you want to be perfectly humble, but you also want to be faithful. You might have to become St. Catherine of Siena, right? You might have to go up to the Pope and say, you're wrong, get your butt home, leave Avignon behind, right? And there might be spiritual Avignons that Pope Francis is living in, or JP2, or Benedict, or Pope Pius XII. Like, I don't just want to focus on Francis.
Yeah.
But Francis is a Pope who is entirely a member of the digital age and of the social media age, because obviously Benedict has been around as the internet, but the social media age, he's the Pope of that time frame. And it is crazy to think that we have access to everything, including the really, really good things, like his Lenten reflections of 2021 were just incredible. But then like the comments that actually add confusion, like when you go on the where he says the Catholic Church's morality is still in diapers, and it's like, you just like comments like that sell out the church. But at the same time, to say what Bishop Strickland said, so again, I'm a layperson and I'm talking about things that I've heard, right? And it's like, but for Bishop Strickland to and I think to go too far in his statement about Pope Francis, that he's leading people away from the church. But these are extremely confusing times to be a Catholic. So then the question, I think, becomes epistemological. How do I know that I know? Right? And this is the point of, this is why tradition matters so much. Tradition matters because what has been held by the faithful is everyone everywhere is a sure guide for what should be held by me. What is things that I've never heard before can be development of doctrine, but should always be held in grave suspicion until it's been filtered through Holy Mother Church, her theologians, her laity. There's always been theological. I think we also have a naive faith where we think that the church has never had theological controversy, except maybe at like, Nicaea and Constantinople, and that was it. But the church has always been, because the truth matters, and people are trying to figure out the truth. Sometimes they overstate it, understate it. Joachim of Fioria, he's a blessed because he burned his books. He was one of these people who was a clear heretic, and he's like, no, I'm a son of the church, burn it. And he got rid of all of his books, disowned it, and his followers also were more psychotic. But yeah, it is difficult. Like, if I heard, for instance, I heard a priest say, you better be careful, you might end up worshiping the host. Well, I do. His name is Jesus, and he is present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the host. And he meant a consecrated host. He wasn't meaning like,
I misunderstood what you said. So
yeah.
I was trying to read a question, so that may have threw you off. Joe, edit that out.
No, keep it in. People need to know. It makes us human. But he said, you better be careful, you might end up worshiping the host. And the person they said it to was like, I do. It's Jesus. And he's like, and just walked away. And you're like,
who was that? Who said that?
This was a priest in very high regard who made a comment to someone else. And they were just talking about Eucharistic devotion. And he was explaining like, oh, I'm a little nervous about this. And it wasn't like an antagonistic, like, let's fight over the holy sacrifice of the It wasn't any of that. And the guy just said, you better be careful or you're going to start worshiping the host. Now, if you have priests that say that, or you have priests, we do. We have priests that deliberately lead people astray, knowing full well what the church teaches. That's where I think the laity need to be bold, but not be jerks. And also, this is where the demigods, this is where they get their ammo. And it's like the sins of the saints pave the way to hell for so many of the faithful.
Well, and it's not, it's it is very like how you said before, it is very hard. And it can drive you insane trying to hold all these things together. And there may just be an aspect of like personal surrender. Like, I've talked about this before, and I don't know if we want to go down this road or not, but like sometimes I just wonder how culpable we are for some of the stuff that we do. When like like our frame of reference disregards being.
Yeah.
So like when that is gone, how do you even start?
Yeah.
When you're exposed to pornography at the age of 6, how do you even start? When like everything's, when we are raised in a country where it's ingrained in your brain that it's a self-made man that counts, a deliberately unchristian idea. And some like antithetical to a lot of what we believe.
Literally, they said against the monkish virtues, meaning Catholicism.
Yeah, like I mean, there's a heresy called Americanism for a reason. Like like that's. I just want, and I'm not saying like everyone should be fine. I'm just like maybe we need to show each other a lot of grace.
Yeah,
and maybe that I don't know, like I feel like I'm a step away from a great point. That okay, you guys talked about on your show, like should the church start to try to regulate as she can, not in terms of like as a whole, just like with what authority she has, what people are saying on the internet in the name of the church, which would include us.
Did we talk about that?
I feel like you hinted at it a bit. Like you quickly.
I was talking
like,
about we need a lot more discernment over
Yeah,
what people
and-
like us say. Yeah.
And is that discernment, should that actually be coming from the church a bit? I know this has been talked about.
Yeah,
this
Bishop
has been
Aaron
talked.
was the
Yeah.
main one that was talking about that.
And I'm like, and I have such weird feelings about that because there's one part of me that's like, yes. And there's this other part of me that's like, no, but people need like the wrestling with it. But it's like, but then we're screwing, like, are we like, you know what I mean? And this gets really weird really quickly. And I don't know. I don't know like what that answer is. Like as a person who loves this, who feels very called to do this, who we have never had a time where this thing was going to end more than this past year. And more on that in a few weeks. Like it, let's call it a tease. Oh, barely. It like
We're live. I'll keep my
I know,
shirt
right?
down.
I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I remember reading this book in college. I think it was like Dr. Grayson or something. He taught a class where he was like, "Yeah, we really should like censor like a lot more stuff." And I was like, "What? You're nuts?" And I don't agree with this, but when he made his argument, I was like, "Okay, I kind of see what you're saying now." But still, like, do we need to maybe be a little bit more? Is there a way to do this where it's not just me being like, you know, who's a jerk? That guy who got mad when we said his name, so I'm not going to. Like,
Just thinking about that today.
I know, right? Like, oh gosh, what a prima donna. Just like Luke, that's wrong. Repent. Sorry. Okay. Like, do we need to be doing that a little bit more? Like, do we need to be willing to be rebuked by priests? Like, do we need to say to priests or to like bishops, hey, if we're out of line, I need you to tell us if you listen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like should there be a little bit more
Accountability to someone.
Yeah, should we
other than
not?
ourselves.
Okay, let me say this. Should we not call ourselves a Catholic? I mean, we don't, but we kind of do.
Yeah.
Should we not call ourselves a Catholic podcast because we don't have the little like this is without air thing?
Yeah.
And I don't know how you do that with podcasts. I really don't. I have no idea.
Yeah, you don't. You can't.
Like, how would you do that?
Yeah, we can't because the content is ever changing, so they can't slap it on. They can slap it on
Yeah.
our old episodes. Hey, not only do you get a dynamically inserted ad, you also get an imprimatur. Yeah, let me see if I can find. There is.
Dynamic ad, yeah. Oh, we got so much more work to do with the megaphone Twitch.
Yeah. I'm trying to find. There's actually some good stuff in Christe Fideis Laity. Pope
of
St.
it.
John Paul's on the vocation of the laity. And it was great. It was about how the laity and the clergy should work together for the propagation of the faith. And also, in the Code of Canon Law, JP2 added a right to the laity, a right to the faithful. And we have the right to proclaim the gospel. We really, really do. But that's not in... we have a right to participate in the lives of the church and doing this stuff. And it's not
true.
because... So here's actually a funny story from history. There's a famous Thomist named Etienne Gilson, or as we call him, Etienne Gilson. And he was writing to...
We
was writing-
dinner here. Sorry.
Exactly.
People guess my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm trying to glance at my shelf to see if I have it. But he was writing a series of letters to Henri de Lubac. Henri de Lubac was a Dominican friar who was writing on the ecclesiology, the relationship between grace and nature. And he was censured by his order because he was pushing something that kind of flew in the face of neo-scholasticism at that time. And he was saying, no, this better represents Thomas and Thomas's original views, right? So he can't do that. Meanwhile, on the other side of Europe, there's Etienne Gilson, by the other side, I think, on the other side of France. Gilson was writing, and they started writing letters to each other. And he's like, because I'm a layman, I don't have this fancy thing called obedience like you do, which is a vow you made to your superior who, when he got enough blowback, and I don't know the whole historical thing, so let's just pretend like my tabloid version is correct.
Yeah.
He gets a bunch of blowback from other Thomas, and he's like, oh, I'm going to shut you down. You're not allowed to talk about that. It ended up being a huge blessing because he talked about other things in the church, ecclesiology, most particularly. But it ended up like, but Henri de Gilson, because he's a layman, he wasn't under the authority of, obviously, other than the bishop and the pope, but he could write. He could do whatever he wanted. No one could stop him. And that led to a lot of really great things. So this is where the difficulty comes in, is the laity ought not to be silenced because maybe there are some things that the clergy are missing that the laity can share. The laity ought not to run their mouths as if church teaching, theology, morality were the playthings of children and half-formed minds and half-formed consciences. I can tell you for a fact, I have met tons of Roman Catholics who everyone would admit they are rock star Catholics, right? Daily Mass, all that stuff, who do not understand like the nuances of Catholic morality. And when you start to talk about it, they're like, what? I don't believe that. And I'm like, I'll show you in the catechism where it says this, and you better believe it.
Joke's on you, sucker.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can run through the whole thing, right? You got a leftist,
Yeah.
you tell them about private property and all this stuff. You got a right winger, you talk about the church's common good and understanding of solidarity and subsidiarity and stuff. And it's just fascinating. Like, it can alienate anyone, and people have their assumptions. So, in short, I don't know the answer. I don't know the way through, but I do know fidelity to the gospel is the first and foremost.
Well, and I'm wondering if, like, kind of going back to your points about the book, like, in the Brothers Karamazov or whatever it's called,
Karamazov.
they, which I'm only like 100 pages in. I've been trying to read it for the past 2 years.
But you're a podcaster, so you're an expert.
Oh, totally. I feel very qualified saying this. I have underlined and shared things.
I've tweeted the crap out of chapter.
Like, one of the characters goes to this like monastery. And I've heard of this before, where like they basically take a vow of obedience to a spiritual director, and it's like, whatever you say, like, I'll do it because I'm with you during this thing. I'm being performed if I want to stay here. And like, I wonder if it's actually would be beneficial. I'm not saying it should be a rule or anything, but like, for us to have, okay, I'm going to like use us as an example of like, do we need a person that we're actually being like obedient to? Do we need to have like a Father John Edith be like, you shouldn't say that, and it's like, okay, you may be wrong, you might be right, but like, we're going to be obedient to you because we need to be obedient to someone.
Should absolutely do that.
Yeah, like
we should absolutely do that, but it has to be a priest who's willing to listen to us.
And that's the thing, like who has time? I mean, besides like,
that guy from New York, that priest from New York, who gave us all that money.
I know.
Wants to do it.
So
please,
funny story.
Father, be our brother.
So that money's now gone. We need
that money's gone.
That helped pay my taxes. That was great. It was so good. Thank you, sir. Oh, God bless you. But no, I mean, like, and I don't think that, I don't know. It's tough because like priests barely have time to be spiritual directors to the people that actually need it.
Yeah.
And so, but is there something where like you can actually have a religious, a priest, whoever, who's in a place where they have the formation, they're qualified to do that, to like kind of be like, hey, you guys, rein it in a bit, or stop talking about this. Like, you're not, or like, you're fine. Like when everything that was going on this past year, there were certain priests that I reached out to. Like, I need to know if you think this is okay, if I keep going. Like, this is what's going on. And I need, because it was tough. It's like, what do I do? Like, do I just stop? Like, if I stop, hurts my vocation, hurts on yours, and we're making a tremendous impact in the church. And Siri just, his Apple Watch is like great but terrible. I was like, what? And it was just everything I'm saying.
Oh, gosh.
I know,
series
right?
on a hair trigger at all times.
It's like there's a thing called a wrist here, and if it bends your hand back, it hits the button in it.
You know what you need to do is you need to flip it upside down and then go into the settings and change orientation that the button's going the other way, and it'll.
I don't want to do that.
I know, no. I don't even know why I brought it up. I apologize.
You monster. No, that's actually a really good point. Now I feel like I'm an idiot.
Find the thread.
Okay.
What were you talking about? I can't remember.
You're right. But like, should there be something where, like again, I don't think you should have this if you're a like when you hit a certain point where it's like, hey, actually, because I get terrified that like we're scandal. Oh, okay. Here's what it was. Yeah. When I was talking with people about like everything that was going on, I was like, we're making such an impact. It's serving our vocations, but it's hard to do that while this crazy stuff is happening. And like, I feel so unqualified. I feel so like, and everyone was like, no, it's okay. Like, here's why. And like, that was really helpful. Mm-hmm. And what if you had that a little bit more with some where we could, check in and be like, hey, so we're talking about this. Should we, is that okay? Is that, I don't know, just like a thing to kind of just keep us in check a bit.
Yeah. And if anyone needs to be held in check, it would be us.
Totally, because we say the craziest crap with blatant disregard.
So much at the beginning of our podcast.
Oh my
when we
gosh!
Were in our 30s. You remember being in your 30s, Luke?
I don't think people understand how much we used to drink. Like we would be like kind of drunk by the end of every episode, every week.
That only happened once.
No, I mean, okay. I mean drunk as in Franciscan drunk, like not like real world.
You need
drunk.
to clarify that because we might have some new listeners that don't know that Franciscan drunk
That's
is lightly
true.
buzzed.
That's true. Well, but I mean, okay, like how many drinks do you think you would have by the end of? I'm talking. Let's go through.
Wait, are we wrapping up the topic of the show and this is the concluding?
Yeah.
All right, folks, here we go. Go.
I would say we probably were averaging 5, which is a lot of drinking.
Yeah,
per person.
But we would also, it was in 2 hours. Right? So that's, so
that doesn't count at all. Binge drinking is 5 over the course of a night.
Might as well be drinking water. In fact, I think it was healthier for me that I drank 5.
Do you know how many times I would have do you remember I had that Pappy Van Winkle that I won, which is an extremely expensive bourbon?
Yeah, it was like $30 a glass or something, the equivalent.
Oh, at least. Yeah. I mean, you could sell it for $1,000 to $3,000. And so I would we started the podcast like, I'll have like a little bit of this. I would like leave some in a glass overnight because we would just keep going. Man, what glorious times.
Can I confess something to you?
Yeah.
At the Frad recording, I was so nervous. Whatever liquid was put in front of me, just like when we went to the Matt Frad show 5 years ago and recorded in that studio in Atlanta.
It was that long ago.
It was probably even longer. I remember I drank all of the coffee and all of the water and all of the cans of sparkling water that they had for us. Because when I get nervous, I fidget with my hands. You can watch me in Pints of the Aquinas. I touch my nose and I put more than I ever have.
Yeah.
It's because of the studio. I didn't feel nervous when I'm actually talking with Matt, but the moment I stop talking, I drink. Right? So he brought out a thing of whiskey. I didn't know he was going to bring that. I don't really like whiskey all that much, but I drank at least half a bottle of whiskey. Now, I had eaten like 2 minutes before I had finished dinner, 10 minutes before we hit record.
Tell me you went to Damon's.
No, I don't have time for that. I really didn't. I was like, oh, it's funny. I haven't even walked campus. I'm just here for the event and I'm out. But at one point, Matt moved the bottle away from me. Because as soon as my glass would be empty, I'd grab the bottle and fill it up. He moved it to be nice, to not have to like yell at me, like normally slow down. And I just reach further over and grab it.
Like, no, this is Catching Fox's time.
This is called Gallons with Aquinas. And at the end of the night, like we were leaving and I was going back to the hotel and, I had drank a ton of water when I was flying and at the airport, and I had like 2 sodas. And I mean, he even put a Zevia. That's what he spit up all over the place whenever I made a joke, which is now one of their short clips. But it was so disgusting, the soda that he gave me. It was like cream soda Zevia, and I drank the whole thing. Just this is me the whole time. I'm just nervous, and I don't know. I shouldn't be doing that with my hands, but I was nervous, and I drank it. I drank everything. And then I got back to the hotel and I laid down and I was like, Oh, this room is kind of spinning.
Oh no, this is Luke in Wisconsin.
So then I fell asleep and I woke up at 4 and I was like, I feel terrible and I have to give the talk tonight. This is awful. But I ended up feeling great after the Advil kicked in.
I came down with the flu 3 hours later. I'm fine.
Yeah, it's a magical flu that only lasts 10 minutes. Hey.
So your boy went out with Patty and with Christina.
Your mom and your sister.
Yeah, and on Friday night, and
You painted the town red.
yeah, me and Christina closed the bar down.
Nice.
Stuff about our dad and Gene God. Well, some guy was trying to talk to us, but unfortunately, it was right.
Yeah. And then I may have had absinthe.
He just leaned over and went, I don't want your life.
I know. I kept trying to say anything, but Christina was wanted to talk about deep stuff. I'm like, yeah. But Varsity Blues is on right now, so let's kind of go back and forth. But there was this. So we were at this like wine restaurant, like wine bar. We've got food. It was great. Then we went to this other bar that had absinthe, and I was like, give me a glass of that. And so in between the two, I had just another drink that had a spray of absinthe. I had normal absinthe, and I was like, man, dying to do my spoof podcast of absinthe with Balthasar. Just think it'd be super cool. It'd be a lot of jazz.
A lot of incense and peppermint. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is it. Are we good? Did we do it?
I think we did it.
Hey, this is kind of fun. Maybe this will help us.
3 o'clock, magic hour. Now I gotta go downstairs and talk to my wife about the damage.
So if you're new here, hit the like button and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you enjoyed this, we are on all podcast platforms. We think there may be 2 on iTunes. Got to fix that. And yeah, I'm Catching Foxes, patreon.com/CF. If you've enjoyed this, it helps us. Thanks to our sponsors, Net, for sponsoring today's episode of Catching Foxes.
Love Net.
And what else do we got?
Hey, is Brad at Net?
Brad.
Bursa?
No. Bursa's, no. Mm-mm.
Who's at Net that you know? That just
Andrea Patch? She's in the Cincinnati. I know like a bunch of people who are at Net.
Yeah.
But I think she's in the Cincinnati office.
Okay. Barnes? Is he there?
No, Barnes is. I think Barnes is. I don't know what he's doing. I know.
Either
sure.
way, just want to say I love Net.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. I love Net.
Thank
Yeah,
you for sponsoring us, Net. I love you. My wife loves you, and the tree trimmer loves you.
Yeah.
We had burrowing wood beetles. That's the reason why the tree snapped and crushed my neighbor's house. Burrowing wood.
Is your neighbor pretty angry? Or
look, you want to talk about the destruction of another human being's habitat in the best possible light? So the freak storm comes through.
Sure do.
The tallest, thickest tree in my backyard snaps 4 feet off the ground. So 60 feet comes crashing down on their house, takes out their fence, their entire backyard with all the branches, takes out 3 of my trees, smashes and smashes almost all the way up to the top of the roof line. So half of their house. The lady who owned it, her husband died 9 months ago. She's a widow.
God bless her. Oh.
She got a new roof put on the house about 3 weeks, maybe now 4 weeks ago.
Jeez.
But she sold it to people who live in Connecticut. They weren't home. They
Oh,
weren't there.
thank
They haven't
God.
moved down yet. Their adult daughter lives in the neighborhood, so they're moving to be closer to her, help out with the kids. And so they were waiting. The tree goes through, crushes. No one's home. Everything's fine. The next door neighbor calls grandma and is like, you gotta, here, all the tree service, all the things I'm doing. Do you just want? And they're like, yeah, just have them do our yard too, and we'll pay you. We'll do all that stuff. No worries. But originally, they took like a really long time getting their roof tarped. And we had 3 more rainstorms. And the guy's like, I don't think you understand the urgency. And they're like, no, the guy's coming out tomorrow. It'll be fine. He's like, your house is going to have tons of water damage. I think that was the point. I think they were saying, yeah, we'll take our sweet time getting there. Let the water damage come, and then we'll get the homeowner's insurance check.
Should we include this on the podcast episode? Like that
crap, maybe we shouldn't. Dang it, I thought this was such a funny thing. Well, when life gives you lemons, the home insurance company can give you lemonade.
These fake people, they make lemonade with it.
Lemon drink.
I want to have a tally the amount of people whose like private stories you have shared on here with just some sort of like ambiguity. What if like they were listening, they'd be like, "Well, that's me."
Yeah, it's like when the Jim Gaffigan jokes about the fat people in the newsreels, where it's like they just blot out their face, but the rest of their body's like obesity in America, and you're like, "Crap, that's me." That looks like my shirt. Oh, crap.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys again for paying attention. Thank you for allowing us to screw up your lives. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and we'll be doing this again.
Hey, and now I just realized this was live on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I said that story live on YouTube.
You did. You did.
Crap. Can you trim the last 5 minutes, Martha? Martha! Bye, everyone.
Just kidding. Bye.